and welcome to this special edition of Suits and Boots, the TDI Sustainability podcast series in conjunction with the Investing in African Mining Indaba. In this series, we discuss some of the key themes that will be covered at the 2026 Mining Indaba conference. I'm Ashton Stewart Carter, Executive Chair at TDI and Board Member and Chief Investment Officer at the Impact Facility. Today, we're joined by one of the winners of this year's Community Voices competition, run by the Impact Facility and the Mining Indaba organisers, Dr. Matondo Estrela Garcia Cardoso, a Senior Community Social Performance Advisor. Now, Dr. Cardoso is very accomplished. She holds a PhD from the Surrey Business School, where her research explored how development minerals can drive poverty alleviation and economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa, with a focus on Angola. And there we have our first connection, I think, Estrela, because my PhD was on a very similar theme, and it was entitled Mining Companies as Agents of Development. And there I was looking to see what were the development benefits of mining around mining developments and in the communities. But Estrela has filled executive roles at the Central Bank of Angola, at Sonangol, at Eni, at Augustino Neto University, and the Canadian Natural Resources Limited. And she currently works with Rio Tinto, where she balances her rotation shift with mentoring and academic research. Not surprisingly, she's been recognized for her impact and leadership, notably being nominated to the International Women's Forum as an International MBA alumna success story, and, of course, one of the nominated award winners of the Mining Indaba Community Voices 2026 in recognition of her impactful research and practical contributions. So it's great to have you here, Estrela, and we look forward to talking to you.
Thank you.
Just to begin, you've worked across academia, you've been in government and now in industry. You've worked on the investment side in Angola's central bank to global mining communities. And looking back across this varied and I'm sure very interesting career so far, what experiences do you think most shaped how you think about communities and mining today?
Well, thank you. This is a very interesting question. So in academia, I've actually learned how communities are often discussed in theory. For example, such as framework indicators and development models that has really given me the structure in terms of critical thinking. But it was still quite removed from daily activities. And obviously working in a government, including at the central bank, I saw how national policies and macroeconomic decisions play out in people's life, often in ways that are not immediately visible. And obviously, this has really touched me that good intention at the policy level don't always translate into real impact on ground. So today, as I move into the mining, my working closely with the communities, that everything is coming connected, is truly connected, like sitting under the tree with community leaders, has given me the overview, listening to different female, youth, and traditional authorities, I realized that community are not we call stakeholder, they are on a matrix form. They are partners with history, expectation, fears, and dignity. So those experiences shaped how I see mining today. I might mention that they are not as an isolated technical activity, but as a social contract. And I've come to realize through my experiences, when mining is done well, it can unlock opportunity, skills, and share value. And when it's done, obviously, poorly, it deepens that mistrust and inequality that we might not see but is visible because we are not doing it right. So Today, my approach to communities and mining is deeply human. I believe sustainability starts with listening, trust, and respect. And only then do systems, standards, and strategy truly work. That's how I see, when we talk about seeing the same community in a very wide seat at the table.
And it makes such good common sense, that, isn't it? That, I mean, you would think that all decisions would be human-centered decisions and not technocratic ones. But you're right that we do seem to have lost in many parts of the economy the ability to include people and communities in decisions, and think more along the terms of economics or other kind of technical disciplines. But do you think, talking about kind of trust and social license to operate, do you think that it's ever possible to have the voices of the communities mediated through a third party? Or do we have to include them directly? How do we, when we talk about communities, that is a term that covers many things, and it's difficult to have representation of all parts of any community, let alone multiple communities. So how do we include them? What's the appropriate way to include their point of view and their voice?
So I always prefer to refer in my own experience. The breakdown usually begins before a project even starts. So when communities feel decisions are already made about them, not with them, it often shows in small but powerful signal. So what really happens, what we have been seeing, is the consultation that happens too late because the information is not shared in technical language. The meetings are held with only a few voices in the room, or promises made by one stakeholder that other cannot honor. So in answering the question, when we look at that social license and community inclusion, that's my view. And once expectations are misaligned at the beginning of every operational change, you can delay workforce decision, land access, procurement. All this becomes more like interpreted through a lens of mistrust. So the issue is not only communication, it's power and participation.
That resonates strong with me. In my career, I've seen many mining operations that have not established a good relationship right at the very beginning of their operation, or even when they're taking over from another mine. And it's very hard to recover a good relationship or build a good relationship after it's gone wrong at the start. But you talk about the social license to operate, and that's a long-term prospect. In some cases, there's thinking, one or two generations ahead. So how does relationship, maybe I should say, between a mining operation and community continue to be sustained throughout its life?
Well, from my point of view, I always insist as well that social license is not a document or a one-off approval. It's a long-term relationship. In practice, earning and keeping should look like three things: shared decision-making, not just a consultation, because communities, they should have a real say in what benefit means locally and how priorities are chosen. And one of the big issues as well is when you look at the consistency and transparency, because automatically it plans change, because is what I said at the beginning, explain earlier, explain honestly, and explain in way people understand. So the language of communication, it's important to kind of trust grows when people feel respected enough to be told the truth. So the third or three things that I've mentioned from is the fair value and local opportunity. job skills, local procurement, grievance mechanism that work, and visible development outcome. So when I look at those three things, still, I'm just talking about this consistency and transparency and the shared decision making that is connected, not as a charity, but as a shared value. And I think we are missing a point when we talk about the social license to operate. Because in terms of how social performance moves beyond compliance is where it becomes strategic. And then we get questions like, in terms of compliance, ask, did we meet the standards? And then in terms of resilience, did we reduce the risk and strengthen relationships so the operation can last? So in my own experience, when social performance is treated as a core business function, it actually strengthens what I call the mineral security, because stable relationship always reduce that disruption, prevent escalation, and obviously create predictability for investors, government, and community. And automatically, it also strengthens long-term stability, because communities who feel included are more likely to protect, not resist the operation. So for me, the shift is always simple. Social performance should be measured not only by activities that have been delivered, but by the outcome like trust level, conflict prevention, local economic participation, and the speed that where we can see that fairness of problem solving. That's what turns the social license into resilience, and resilience into long-term value for everyone.
And I'll come back to that in a minute, but there's something you mentioned in your opening remarks about power and participation. And I remember meeting and working on Robert Chambers, who's the emeritus professor at Sussex University, who wrote a lot on power and participation. And I think you might have been in a program which drew on his work when you were doing your PhD there. And I kind of think that that's quite a difficult thing to bring into a mining company, sharing your power and having communities participate in decisions. How do you make the case within the mining organizations that in order to build trust and long-term security with the communities, they need to give up a little bit of their control or some of their management practices they might be accustomed to?
So, what from my own experience, what I've been also learning from the communities is the local procurement. We don't really talk about local procurement. It's more like the social inclusion. They need to be feeling part of the company, and how it has been done in my work across Africa, and my specific case in Angola was during the engagement process is to bring conversation on such as initiatives. But to do that, you need to engage. You need to build that, what I said, really resilience into a long-term communication. And it's something I feel during my field work while I was really collecting my data for my PhD. Was it took me like almost 8 months to understand the value, the culture, and that's where I felt the local procurement, what today we call probably social inclusion, it's important by using the community voice and scaling up based on their knowledge, initiatives that speak to the problems they are facing. So for me, that's what I call participation. It's something that you don't see it outside the box, so, but it has to be while you're on the ground, dealing with every issue every day. And this is probably what today I see that needs to also to be bring in terms of policies. We are not talking about this local economic participation whereby the communities, based on the challenges they go through, we can actually align the solution and fairness of problem solving. That's how I see when we talk about participation based on my own experience. I hope I made it clear. and
I think you make it very clear, and I'm sure that's your ability to make things clear is probably part of the reason of your success to get this into organizations. And I think what you say is very true in my experience that, you know, if you want to build trust with anybody, but with communities around an industrial development in particular, you need to spend time with them. It's not something you can just dash in and dash out and have one town hall meeting, expect to come to a solution around. You need to be present and return and keep the conversation going, be consistent and show that you're genuine in your intentions. So I'm curious, going back to the question on the resiliency, you have to make the case for this longitudinal approach within your organization. And you said that it's about security of the asset itself. How do you make that case to your senior management? How do you make the case that if they don't build good relationships, it could interrupt the cash flow or the operations?
So, in every operation, and is what I've been seeing across my research, across my daily activities, and engaging with different stakeholders, is assessing the risk before you engage. And I'm always going back to the real cases I face in my own country, as when you are entering a specific communities. We have entry protocols where resilience is one of the questions. It's like I always ask, but resilience, how can I be resilient with the people whereby they don't need much, but they just want to be heard? So it's a question of asking how we reduce the risk and strengthen relationships so the operations that the company is aligning, whether it's for critical mineral project, whether for those strategic, we call diamond projects, are aligned with the community needs. Because what I've been identified so far when I engage with chief, we call Sobat, the chief of the village, is he will give you an overview of the culture, how they live. And you need to be able to be resilient even yourself, because it's all about managing expectation and telling them the truth. What the company intention, what they need to do, but obviously the priority is to know how the communities around the operation areas live, what they do, whether there is any risk associated to the concession area. So that's where I bring those mineral security, is when social performance is really treated as a core business function. Because stability, it's through reducing those kind of disruption. We have seen cases where we had to prevent escalation and automatically create a safe environment inside the community. But again, as I said, it can only be done if that engagement process and the stakeholder mapping is well done. And we can only do it through identifying those resilience associated risk, knowing the culture, knowing your communities, knowing the language you're going to communicate. it's very important as well. So at the end of the day, what you really build is the trust. And automatically, once you build up the trust, you can even secure the social license to operate. And automatically, it's through all resilience, respect, and knowing that, hey, this space probably doesn't belong to me, but based on the long-term relationship I'm building, I'm also automatically building that stability because the community, they feel they are part, they're integrated, they're included into the company strategy. So it's a process of engaging, of knowing, of being resilient, and also be able to listen.
Thank you for that. And I think one word stood out for me there is stability as a good way to explain the business case to senior management. I don't think I can count the number of times that my managers said to me, Assheton, we don't want any surprises. So understanding and allowing communities to be understood, I think, is a key part of what you're saying. Nowadays, Estrela, we hear a lot about digitalization of almost everything. But I was at a panel the other day at a conference, and we were talking about community relations and community assessments. And there was a general consensus this is one area where digitalization didn't have a part to play. But I think you have a different view on this, and you have used digitalization as an enabler for stronger partnerships. Could you give us a little bit of a explanation of how you think it can be used and maybe some examples of how you used technology in community engagement?
Okay, so a very clear example is when I read the article, I referred to the video on Jamaica example. What struck me most was not the technology itself, but how it was used to rebalance the community relationship. So the digital platform were applied to improve transparency, track commitment, and make information accessible to communities in real time. Not only to regulator companies. So the relevance for it, I looked at African mining contests. It's kind of very strong because many of the challenges community face are not about of lack of resources, but again, about lack of visibility, accountability, and trust. And for example, in Africa, digital tools can help shift power dynamics by democratizing information. And when community can see project timelines as well, employment opportunity, grievance processes, or environmental data in format that they can be able to understand and speak to the issue. So they move from being passive recipient to informed participants. And those simple tools such as mobile platform, SAM systems, digital registers, payment system can obviously reduce manipulation and capture what I said at the beginning, the inclusion, feeling like, okay, we are part of the operation process as well. So that's how I see digitalization as a practical partnership model. But again, technology alone is not enough. We need to talk about digital skills that must be paired with diverse form of training, financial literacy, governance, health and safety, entrepreneurship, and leadership. This combination is what creates, again, resilience beyond the life of a mine, because once you start engaging with a community, you can actually identify the set of skills they have. But because of lack of training, the forms of trainings I've mentioned, obviously they get stuck. So when people gain those transferable skills, they're better able to adapt. to start any type of business, to engage even with local authority and participate in the economy long after closure. So in that sense, I see digitalization becoming a bridge between mining and sustainable development, not a short-term fix. And in terms of practical partnership model, the most effective ones I've seen share three features. The first one is clear and share rules between communities, companies, and the state, with no ambiguity about responsibility. The second one I remember is co-design development plans, when priorities are agreed jointly and reviewed while you are engaging regularly with communities. And the third, I might say, mechanism for accountability. It's actually often supported by digital tools that allows all parties to track progress and raise any concern at each level of the project. But it has to be done at the beginning, where you engage, where you are starting to know the people around the concession area. So the mechanisms is very important for accountability. Again, when partnerships are built this way, mining stops being a transactional activities and becomes a platform for long-term collaboration. And obviously that is how trust is rebuilt, not through promising, but through system that people can see, access, and influence.
That again is very, very clear. And I think you laid out some good examples where technology can enable, but you also said that technology isn't a replacement for building trust. You still need that person-to-person engagement, but it can be a facilitating tool. And to be an effective tool, you need to be able to master it. So we can't be lazy users. We have to be active and more sophisticated users of technology. Otherwise, it might actually be a result that we don't like as much, and it is not enabling, but in fact reducing the trust. One of the statements that you made in your video, I really liked. It was that you believe that progress shouldn't only be measured in tons of ore minerals extracted. What indicators should governments and companies then be using instead to judge the success of a mineral development?
So thank you. When I say progress should only be measured in tons extracted, I mean that volume tells us what we took, not what we left behind. And from my experience, government and companies should be looking at indicators such as the good quality of local jobs created, the skills transferred, the strength of local suppliers, and the level of community trust. And something as well, perhaps we don't really communicate well, is how effectively grievances are resolved. So we should also be measuring whether community are better off at closure than were at the start of the project. And economically, socially, and institutionally, those are the metrics that tell us whether mining has truly contributed to development. And what really gives me that confidence about the future that we are all talking about in African mining, that obviously lead us to development. It's important for us to pause and look at those indicators. They are very important for a call to action and to improve again the policies we are all working, updating, And without research, without measuring the indicators I've mentioned, I don't think we're going to get it right. So it's work in progress. But at the same time, I keep telling people it's important to engage. It's important to understand the culture. It's important to respect the communities before starting, because that's going to impact even at the closure process at the end of your project. So those metrics, they have to be aligned with the everyday conversation, company strategy, company objective, performance appraisal we all talk about today. It has to be aligned with the community's voice.
And presumably, we'd want these performance measures to be read by the investors, the mine managers, the offtake partners, and be seen in an integrated scorecard, so not pushed off to one side. I think, very sadly, I'm looking at the clock, and we might have come to the end of our time today. But you have won this very appropriately, this wonderful award to go to the Indaba, and the theme at the Indaba this year is working together or partnership, stronger together. That's what the theme is, stronger together and partnerships. What do you hope to achieve at this year's Indaba when you're there?
Well, personally, what I would like to get out of this year Mining Indaba is connection with purpose. I want to exchange the practical ideas, experiences I have, challenge assumption, and help ensure that community voices, especially from Africa, are not just present, but influential. If I live in Indaba knowing that one partnership was strengthened, one blind spot was addressed, or one mindset shifted, then I would consider that a real progress.
Wonderful. And Estrela, we've heard a lot about critical minerals, which are generally understood to be those minerals that can contribute to the energy transition globally, but also development minerals, things like sand, clay, limestone, and granite, play an important part in development, especially local development. Can you give us some of your thoughts on that?
What gives me confidence about the future of African mining is that development minerals sits exactly at the intersection of people, place, and progress. They are local by nature, labor intensive, and deeply connected to housing, infrastructure, and urban growth. So, if governed well, they can formalize livelihood, strengthen local economies, and automatically create pathway for women and youth to participate meaningfully. So the idea of stronger together becomes real when we move extractive thinking to co-creation, where communities, states, and companies jointly design outcome, not just to manage impact. So, and for me, that's what this moment matters. We have better data, better tools, and more honest conversation that we did a decade ago. So the opportunity now is to connect policy, practice, and people, and development mineral are a powerful place to start. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Dr. Matondo Estrela Garcia Cardoso, for joining us today. And to our listeners, please check out the rest of this special series of Mining Indaba podcasts on the TDI Sustainability Suits and Boots podcast channel. I really do look forward to seeing you all at the event and meeting in person Dr. Cardoso and hearing from her and others who have won awards in the Community Voices 2026. I'm Assheton Carter, and thank you for listening.